All right, Charles Stovall, your franchise friend. I appreciate you joining us here today on another episode with the Junk Reader crew. And I'm thrilled to have you on just because what you're involved in from different angles within the franchise space and business ownership. So, for the audience, if you wouldn't mind just giving a little background on your experience, what you do today, but maybe just a little journey recap of how you've gotten here over the last, 5, 10, 15, 20 years, however long you've been doing it would be phenomenal.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me on, Davis. Yeah, so you know, um, a little over a decade ago, I was kind of at a crossroads where I think many people are, as they start to, venture into getting into business ownership. And I called up a college buddy of mine, and had the idea that we were going to open up a cell phone store up in the mountains of Virginia. And so we found like a 600 square foot space, and and it was like $1,000 a month, and it included everything. And so we that was kind of my first step into business ownership. And the whole idea was to make $1,000 extra a month, just some extra spending money, some beer money. And
Yeah.
and so that was how I at least pitched it to my college roommate. And so yeah, we started there, and within 4 years we had 20 stores across 5 states. And and that kind of led to an exit for me and him over a 4 year period. And then I ventured into the world of Massage Envy and franchising. And the Massage Envy, we had 7 locations across the state of Virginia.
Hmm.
And that also had its unique challenges, but operated those for about 4.5, 5 years as well. And exited that space about 2 years ago.
Awesome.
And while I was within that Massage Envy, franchise ownership, I started to explore different franchises, and bought into a fitness concept, Yoga Six, which never got launched because of COVID. But
Hmm.
during that time, I was using a franchise broker that could, a franchise consultant broker, that helped me find Yoga Six. And so, as I was still on Massage Envy, I became a consultant from a referral from him, and started. I joined Franchoice, and so I kind of just like did it like part time for a little bit, helped some friends, and started to realize that there needed to be transparency in this space. And so, really, for the past 3.5, 4 years that I've been doing franchise consulting, my whole tagline, as I was sharing with you earlier, is your franchise friend. And really just try to, offer some transparency about, what is it like to be a franchise owner? What does that time commitment look like? What does that investment look like? And really kind of answered some questions for people that are really on top of their mind. Because the thing is, like, this isn't for everybody. And I think if you come into franchising with a cynical approach of like that's not going to work, or this isn't going to work, or whatever, then you're not going to make it far. And so you gotta really kind of believe that you can tackle something, and plug yourself into a system and make it work. So
Yeah.
matching people with those types of concepts and matching them with the right concept is kind of what I enjoy doing. And in the meantime, I've bought into a new concept called Image Studios. And Image Studios is a salon suite concept that many people are familiar with. They are typically on the higher end, and we are developing our first location now in Columbia, South Carolina.
Awesome. That's
Yeah,
phenomenal. And so first location in Columbia, is that the first one that'll open?
that will be the first one that will open. Yeah, and
Awesome.
there will probably be some acquisitions along the way, I would imagine. But that's right now we're eyeing opening that one in July of this year.
Awesome. So a
Yeah,
million questions, Charles, and I'm trying to figure out which rabbit hole I want to go down here. But
yeah, it's
thank
all
you
good.
for the
Yeah.
background for sure. I'll start with, so you talked about your experience with Boost Mobile, and you got that to an exit. Same thing with Massage Envy, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong there, but like what fueled your desire to exit, right? Versus keeping those companies, those brands, those franchise territories up until today, and just continuing to to monetize that and run those really well and increase revenues and be really
Yeah,
good,
sure.
efficient, and profit on them. What is it? Just your desire to want to create something, build it, scale it, sell it, and then go on to the next? Is that just in your blood?
Yeah, like I think that's the easy answer is that, but ultimately it also was, timing and, there's like typical things and indicators that you don't expect sometimes, and like
Mm,
we for Boost Mobile, like we were the second largest in the nation, and then the next guy had like 80 more locations than us. Like it wasn't even close, and
yeah.
so um, and we just kind of felt like, as you start to get bigger, you want to create more opportunities for the people that you have,
Mm,
and that work for you. And
yeah.
so, like my desire to continue to get bigger and stretch myself even further, like wasn't there, but the
Mhm.
opportunity to give them an opportunity to move, to plug themselves into a bigger organization and take them on a different career path was there for them. And so everything just kind of lined up. It was
Yeah.
just here's a bigger guy that can kind of take us over, and you know, um, and like having a Boost Mobile store, presents its own set of challenges. You're typically in an underserved area, like cash preferred customers. And these customers, like there's a lot of crime. It's crime ridden areas, and so you just so that makes it a little tough too. There's a lot of cash management, so at the bigger you get, it's hard to manage the cash. And so it just kind of was a nice transition.
Makes sense.
With Yeah, Massage Envy was very much similar. It was, like Massage Envy had partnered with these private equity firms, and they were allowing them to kind of roll people up. So as the franchise systems become more mature, there's things happen to franchisees. Life happens, right? And so without these locations going faltering, because the owner is either, has passed away or a life event has happened, they've had these private equity companies that kind of scoop in and come in and start running them. So they were building out like 80 to 100 massage MVs and also acquiring some. And so, like again, it just presented a better path, a career path for the people that worked for us. As we had seven, and then you just saw all the ones around you start to get gobbled up and built. And then you're kind of just sitting there on an island and just like, okay, we're not growing, they're growing. And so so you just start to kind of feel like, either you're gonna be boxed in or
Yeah,
you're gonna sell,
I can
so
understand it. Yeah, and
yeah.
for the audience, I mean, I think the angles that you have, Charles, right? There's a lot of franchise brokers and consultants out there who have never been a franchisee, and to me, nothing against it. It's just you bring to the table a sense of, you're talking with a potential candidate. You've been there, like you can speak to that side of the coin, which I think is super valuable. And so, with that, what you've seen in the franchising world overall, Charles, and I think we touched on it pre-roll, but like the responsible franchising mantra that we're starting to see a little bit more of. Can you speak a little bit to maybe what it looked like 5 or 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when you were with, coming through with Boost and Massage Envy and the brokers you knew about or were involved in, and then fast forward to today, what does the industry look like with just folks like you who are trying to take the right approach to making sure candidates belong in franchising, and then those that do join the right brand? Like, what advancements have we made around responsible franchising in the last 5, 10, 15 years that you've seen?
Yeah, like I'm not sure that we've really made advancements as much as we've taken step backs,
Yeah.
and I know that, and like, and ultimately I think like, franchising was birthed from this, like, and I think in people's mind, like without knowing this world, they see the things that on the side of the road, those are franchises to them. The
Mm,
Chick-fil-A's, the Subways of the world, and whatever it might be. And so those are the ones that they're familiar with. They don't typically know about like the home service franchises. They don't understand like what a territory means,
mm,
or they don't understand like what the investments are, and they don't typically understand like what the risks are that are being laid out in front of them really are,
mm,
and so like just being able to educate themselves on that, like self-educate themselves on that is
Hmm.
tough. Like it's tough to really, because you see a shiny new toy and you say, "Hey, I really love this brand," because I'm a consumer of that brand in
Hmm.
some fashion. Like somebody could come replace your roof or remove your junk, and you have no idea that that's a franchise. It's just, you
Right.
just think of some two guys in a truck or something. But you're
Yeah.
consumers of this other brand. You're like, that taco place would do really well,
Hmm.
here, or that fitness concept would do really well here, without really understanding what those risks are. And so, they end up becoming just like the amount of time that they had to put into the business, they what wasn't expected, or
Yeah.
the amount of money wasn't expected. And so, like, I think, like, I try to, like, the hardest thing is being a consultant is that, people think we're trying to sell them a brand, like,
Right.
like you're trying to sell us, and it's like, use me as a resource. Like the willpower has to come from within. Like, I'm not gonna be able to talk you into buying a business. That's crazy. Like,
Yeah.
so if you don't have that burning desire, then you're not gonna make it very far anyway. And so, like,
Mhm.
you have to use the resources that you have. And so whether it's, someone like myself or other people who are in the franchising space that, like, just make sure that you pick up the phone and call as many people as that
Yeah.
are within that industry or have connections to that industry, whether it's franchising or, junk removal or roofing or,
Yeah.
frying chicken nuggets, whatever it might be. Like, pick up the phone and do your research, because there are a lot of resources available now, but the landscape has changed quite a bit, and especially when it comes to the franchise development, and it's just, like, people bite off a significant portion of territory that they cannot serve, and you have to make sure that you're doing it smart, so you don't come into the opportunity undercapitalized.
It's such a good point, Charles, that, um, you know, at least for me in my experience, everybody in the franchise space, that literally everybody that I've ever chatted with has been super open to being helpful. And that's not to say that we end up working together, right? You and I may never work together. We never, we may never
Yeah,
work together and getting a candidate. I may never work with another broker or an FSO or anybody, but everybody in the world is always helpful to have. I'm happy to chat with you. Just, kind of lay out the lane. I'll identify some risks. I'll, poke holes in your business to hopefully help you, or I'll maybe point you in the right direction. So for those listening, like, I would take that to heart and absolutely reach out to as many folks as you possibly can, because unlike, like traditional sales roles or like cold calling people where you get hung up on 99% of the time, it's quite the opposite with the franchise world. Like,
yeah,
most folks want to talk to you, which I think is very unique and awesome. On the
yeah.
franchisee side, Charles, which is interesting for me because I'm a franchisor talking with a franchisee. What are some mistakes or common mistakes that you've seen Zors make with Z's as you've been involved in the franchise brands that you've been involved in, that you're like, man, if I were sitting in that seat, I would have done this differently, or I would have done more of this and less of this. Anything that comes to mind of like, yeah, most franchisors tend to get this wrong, or they don't support us in this way. Anything pop out to you?
Yeah, like, I think, like, probably just getting away from what got why they started that business, and so, like, as a franchisor, and, helping other people and understanding, like, they're putting their life savings on the line. And so, and you're bringing in people from different backgrounds, different ethnicities, different morals, everything, like, all these people that you're awarding franchise locations to, are different. And so,
Mhm.
listening to your franchisees and continuing to listen to them as you get as you start to grow, and so, like, at Massage MB, like, it was just too big. We had 1,200 locations.
Yeah.
They were trying to get unique with how they were, um, like, getting more revenue out of the franchise, or out of the franchisees. And, like, they started selling their own lotions and their own face products, and they're all, and like, well, massage therapists put their hands in this lotion every day. Like, like, this lotion doesn't work, like, it's, and
Yeah.
so, like, they just try to, pick and pick and pick and pick without really thinking about profitability, you know?
Mhm.
And so, there's just conversations and just having a forum for conversations and taking that feedback, and making sure that you're selecting the right partners, right? And
Yeah. Yeah.
making sure that those people are the ones that can take your business to the next level. So, if you put in a partner and it's a bad apple, then it could create issues. So, slow growth, smart growth, I think is smart.
Yeah. And so you've obviously been involved in brands that are, more retail brick and mortar concepts. What is your outlook on just the home services space, or I guess it doesn't even have to be home services, just services in general outside of brick and mortar? With folks that you've chatted with, I mean, it seems like most of what we hear is that the market is gravitating towards service-based businesses more so. Is that what you've experienced in your conversations with candidates and
Yeah.
just being in the market?
Yeah, I think like whenever you're talking to candidates, like, and if you want to call it pitch, you can call it pitch, but it's, like it's the, laying out the risk, like what's my risk look like with brick and mortar versus
Mhm.
what does my risk look like with home services, and I think whenever people, categorize this and they say, okay, like if, if I fall on my face with something home service, I can sell my trucks and stuff and like I'm out, like whatever,
Mhm.
but if I'm at a brick and mortar space, then like I've built this whole space out. I've got a 10-year lease, so my risk is a lot more substantial. So I think people gravitate towards home service, but then they typically don't ever think about themselves doing home service stuff because, again,
Mhm.
kind of going back to my earlier point, they think about franchising being brick and mortar because those are the things that
Yeah.
they see on the side of the road every day, and
Mhm.
so like labor is always a concern, for them. So, and what that looks like, you know, and that's what kind of concerns me sometimes when people get into home service businesses and then they're touted as semi absentee or whatever it might be. And it's like you could you may not touch a piece of junk with your business, and that's totally possible. Like you may not have to ever get in the car or in the truck and load up any junk. It's totally possible, but you got to take care of your people,
Yeah.
and you got to build a culture, and you got to give somebody a reason to want to come to work. I mean, this junk
Mhm.
removal, it's not the sexiest thing in the world,
Yeah.
and so, so what is it? Like, and it's typically the franchisee. That's why people want to come and do it because of them. It's not because they love removing junk.
Yeah.
And so if you've taken this approach that I'm going to run this business hands off, then they're going to treat it that way. They're going to
Mhm.
treat that business like they don't care about it. And
Right.
so you got to be careful, right? In the home service space, just as well as the retail space. And again, I think just kind of going into it with the right expectations is makes all the difference.
Yeah.
So
Well, I think I think you opened up another topic that I was interested in, which is all these buzzwords around semi-absentee or fully absentee or investor models. To touch on, just from the franchisor side, for me, what excites me about, because I was in the same boat 6 years ago when we first started Junk Rate. I was like, remove junk. Like what my business partner and I were like, what about junk removal? Like, and I can't even remember why we thought about it, but it was like, what's sexy about that? Like you're seeing all over social media, people, influencers are generating revenue doing this stuff and video creation and all this more sexy stuff. The services space, the trades, the home services spaces don't get that kind of clout because they're not sexy jobs. They're needed
right,
jobs. They're almost commodities, but like it's good business. And so for me, what excited me then to start the business and what continues to excite me is the business of running a business. It's not the task itself. I don't love going out in the field and picking up a couch and throwing it in a truck. It's okay sometimes, right? If I want a quick workout, but like it's figuring out how to be more strategic. Like how do I carve out my niche in this market? How do I beat the competition with and going after
yeah,
this corporate partnership? And how do I increase my profits? Or how do I retain employees better? Like that is just, I mean, that's the spirit of what entrepreneurship is. And I think if you can wrap your head around that, I spoke with a guy that earlier today who's a franchisor with what was this? He's in like the pet waste space, right? It was a Poo Squad. Like his company's literally named Poo Squad, and I'm like, you really got to love just building a business to be in that particular space. a needed space, right? People are paying for it today. But you really got to love just running a business. So long-winded kind of thing there, Charles. But like, what have you seen? How prevalent are these terms that get thrown around in the franchise world of semi-absentee, fully absentee? Hey, you can just throw money at this thing and be an investor and put a team in place, and you don't have to do anything all week. You just sit back and collect the mailbox check. Like, what's the reality of the franchise world specific to like home service brands that you've been involved in at any form?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Well, the kind of, a long-winded answer to that is like, I try to share with people like nobody has a crystal ball, like how much time this is going to take. Right. And so, what I've seen, which is exactly what happened to me, speaking from experience, is, I kept my job when I opened up my first business, and so, like, and I think that's what people were really trying to get to, right? Like, can I keep my job and
Yeah.
run this business? Like that's really what the answer that they're trying to get. But it ultimately means that you've added more to your plate, so that's going to take more time. So
Mhm.
you know, and so like, how can I prioritize my time? Is the answer that people are looking for. Like,
Right.
and what I've seen is that people reprioritize their time to their business once they start to realize that they can make more money by prioritizing their time to their business. And so but it usually takes semi-absentee doesn't happen overnight. Semi-absentee doesn't typically happen in the first year or even in the second year.
Mhm.
But what that looks like is you can build up to a semi-absentee. But I think what people are looking for whenever they get that term is, am I going to be doing the work?
Yeah.
Or can I keep my job? And, like those are the two answers that they're really looking for whenever they hear that word. And so they need to explore that, not
Mhm.
necessarily get hooked on the marketing term of semi absentee or executive
Right.
model. And so, the problem is that people have proven to be able to do it, and like, and
Mhm.
they have people that validate on
Yeah.
their calls that do it. Like, I mean, there was a roofing concept I remember I was on the validation call for one time, and I mean, the guy kept his job. Like, they started out, they did like, a couple $1 million in their first 6 months, and like all this, and like he was like, yeah, just call the guy once a week, and and it gets people's hopes up, and
For
I'm like,
sure.
and it's just, and that's just, he is the exception, not the
Yeah.
rule. And so that's why, again, kind of going back to our earlier point of like picking up the phone, like set the appropriate expectation for yourself,
Mhm.
like if you're tied to a desk and, and you don't have any time to pick up the phone and you have to have your job, franchising is probably not going to work out for you.
Yeah.
If you
Yeah.
are flexible in what you're doing now and you have time to spend, time to build a culture, and you can, even have like an operational partner, then those
Mhm.
are things that you can explore as you start to look at different concepts, as you start to, put the pieces of this puzzle together. Right.
Yeah.
And so those are kind of the things I look for in candidates. Like, can they, piece it all together, right? Like people are just like, give me the answers, and like from the franchisor, but like, can you go out and get the answers yourself? Can
Right.
you go out and make those phone calls? Because that's also going to come really handy whenever you own your own business. Like you
Mhm.
said earlier, like how can I, you know, make more profit? How can I keep my people? How can I do this? How can I do that? It
Yeah.
just, typically doesn't come to you overnight. You make phone calls, you talk to people that mentors and other
Mhm.
franchisees. So can you go out and get the answers? And that's always a good sign of a good franchisee to me.
Yeah. Well, I think context means everything. Like forget the terminology that's floating around in the marketplace. Like when I'm sitting down with a new candidate, like I just want to know about you and your situation and what your tendencies are. Like you're going to be different than Charles and different from Susie. And
Yeah.
you may have a job that doesn't care what you do during the day. Like as long as maybe you're in sales, like as long as you're hitting numbers, like nobody cares, you work remote. Sure, go stand up a business, while you keep your day job. What I can tell you is that we're obviously speaking only from our experience in junk removal, but like you have to be available at least Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, 8 to 6, 9 to 5, 9 to 6 type hours to handle things in the field that need to be handled in real time. It's a very reactionary business. So if you've got this job that requires your time, your presence, maybe whether that's remote or on site, like you can't run this business, at least our particular business, while holding down a W-2 job that also needs your physical presence somewhere. So it's very contextual, and then obviously you can go down the thread of like, are you financially capable? Like, or do you have personnel that you can deploy day one to go do the jobs in the field? If you can, well then yeah, sure, maybe you fit more so into the semi-absentee role of a business owner where you can be semi-absentee, like you're quarterbacking things more so, and you got people in the. It's just
Yeah.
very everything is very contextual. So great point.
Right.
So one other question here, Charles, and we'll start to kind of wrap it up. But like, what are you seeing in the home services space from different brands that are doing kind of innovative things, and not necessarily at the material level, like, oh, we've got a new mosquito concept, or somebody's doing dog cleanup waste, but like with the brands that exist today, like there's competition in junk removal, there's competition in gutter cleaning, and all these brands. But like, what are you seeing from the brands that are really excelling in terms of like how they're innovating in their space? Like, is it better digital marketing? Is it they've got the call center licked, or like anything that you're seeing in the home services space specifically that's innovative and you can point to and be like, all right, that one's knocking it out of the park, and what is that?
Yeah. So, I think it obviously depends on the concept, but I think what a lot of people will will look for in some of these brands is what is their differentiator, right? And
Mhm.
so, like if I'm only doing junk removal, then like the question that we'll always get is, well, what's like why can't I just do my own junk removal, right?
Yeah.
Or whatever it might be, and so so I think what people are looking for is either differentiator or support. So
Mhm.
what does that support look like? And like a lot of people who are like getting into this, like they want to see like what's the marketing like you said, digital marketing look like, or
Mhm.
but what like they want to see a this like multitude of things that they don't have to do, that where they can just focus on the business. And I
Yeah.
think that's where people are starting to really gravitate, like, oh, they really do have it buttoned up, and they really like the founder, and
Mhm.
so it's just a multitude of things where I feel like it's just like, hey, here's the whole suite of services that we're providing you, so that way I feel like I'm getting something with my franchise fee and my royalties,
Right.
because like and also good franchisees that are in the system, like like I think if you have like franchisees that are willing to pick up the phone and talk to these other franchisees,
Mhm.
like outside of validation calls, and just, be an open book. Like that goes a long way for people who are looking at different concepts, because like they get it, like, it's not, you can't really, like improve junk removal
Yeah.
necessarily. You're just you're doing junk removal just like you are the other, just like anybody else. But how can I become more efficient at junk removal? How
Mhm.
can I get my name out there? Like what type of support am I going to get? Like, you're going to have your hiccups as you're starting to, and you're going through these growing pains. What, are you going to be there for me when those things happen?
Yeah.
Or who's going to be there for me? And I think that's, that's what people are trying to overcome. And so, I think like some franchise systems and some like these like larger companies that have like a bunch of brands underneath them, they're able to kind of utilize all their resources to support a bunch of franchisees. But some of that may be overpromise, I feel like, like
Mhm.
where it can be, oh, look at this, they help me hire people and they do all my marketing, and
Yeah.
but yet like my fees are really high, but this is it's
Yeah.
going to pay for itself, and I think that
Mhm.
there's a healthy balance, because really at the end of the day, it's like you've got to execute, but you also need the money to execute. And so as long as you have like a really good support system in place, maybe there's a differentiator with the brand, maybe there's not, and I think it's okay either way,
Yeah.
like you may be able to provide the same exact junk removal service down here in Charleston that, we probably have 6 or 7 of them,
Yeah.
but it can you execute better than the other guys,
Yeah.
and I think that's really what it's going to come down to while people start to do their due diligence on these brands. So
Yeah, all good stuff. I think in summary, what I would say to that is, is basically the differentiator is franchise brands actually delivering what it means to be a franchise. You know, like there, unfortunately, there's so many brands that have come up in the past where they've started a franchise, and to your earlier point, the franchisors gotten away from why they even franchised in the first place. But like everything you talked about, like the support, the, you know, do you have everything buttoned up? Like, what are we doing in the first 30, 60, 90 days to ensure your success? What are we doing ongoing in months 6 through 12 to ensure you're successful as a franchisee? That's what franchising is all about. It's you are buying into a mastermind of a bunch of
Yep.
people that are all doing the exact
Exactly.
same thing. And so if you're not driving that at the franchisor level, then you're failing all the franchisees. And so it's unfortunate to hear that the differentiator is those that are doing it the right way, because that's what franchising is. We should all be doing it the right way. But it's a great point because there's a lot of folks that are failing at it, unfortunately. And that's where folks like you, Charles, come into play with candidates to hopefully mitigate that risk on the front end so that they don't buy into the wrong brand and they end up in a place where they're literally on an island, and like you paid a fee,
Yeah.
you're paying an
Right.
ongoing royalty, and you're not getting the support you
And they're
need. So
figuring it out as they go.
yeah,
And exactly, and that's like, that's the hardest part about what we do as consultants is that, do I want to show you a brand that I know you're going to love, but
yeah,
probably on the back end, I know it's a disaster, but you're going to love the brand, right? Like, oh my
mhm,
God, this is exactly what I wanted,
yeah,
and then, or do I show you a business that's like totally buttoned up on the back end, that has a really strong support system, that has a bunch of happy franchisees, but it's unsexy and it's definitely not something that you thought that you were going to buy in,
yeah,
and I think that, people would tell me the latter, but they're
mhm,
so disappointed whenever we show them brands that they don't think that they would have looked at, and
yeah,
so the importance of being, working with a consultant, again, whether, when people do work with them, is just like, you have to have an open mind, because if you do have a good relationship with your consultant, if you feel like there's a connection there and they have your best interest, which they should, then you kind of just have to trust what they're showing you is going to be a good match, and then you're going to, do that due diligence on that and talk to franchisees and
right,
really back up what, the franchise consultant's telling you. So,
for sure.
you know,
Man, Charles, good stuff. I appreciate the time. Super helpful for me. I'm not a franchisee, I'm a franchisor. And getting this perspective is always great, whether you're thinking and talking through the lens of a consultant or as a franchisee. And our goal, obviously, here at Junk Reader is to grow the right way, grow at a sustainable pace. You know, we don't want to add 50 new franchisees in a year that we can't support. Back to the responsible franchising piece, and so we need folks like you that are having those conversations with candidates on the front end and setting right expectations and so on and so forth. So if you
yeah.
want folks to find you, Charles, what's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, man. You can go to my website. I'm franchisefriend.net. You can look me up there, and you can feel free to book a call with me if you want to talk. I'm happy to be transparent. You don't have to work with me, but if you ever have any questions about anything, I'm an open book. So feel free to look me up.
Amazing. Charles, I'll let you get back to it. And again, we appreciate the time. I'm sure we'll be in touch.
All right. Thanks. Nice to meet you, Dave.
Thanks.